explain to me, was there a kind of 24-hour-a-day job that you guys had as actors, that it wasn't enough to work all day, but then you'd get all duded up and you'd go out? I mean, I was just surprised that Billy Wilkerson also owned the Trocadero. You know, I mean, it's like he had the whole thing covered. He had the actresses, the situation. He had the Hollywood Reporter, and then he had the nightclub. Do you think that was all very deliberate to get everyone's name out in front of people?
Well, I think the Jack Warners and the L.B. Mayers and the Skinks and some Cohens might have been a help to have a place where their people could be seen at a certain level, and with what was felt then about the Trocadero, a certain class to the place, where the acts in the place would be, okay, you can have Lena Horne because she also, she sings well and everything else aside from looking so pretty. I think they might have been a big help to Billy in that respect.
Did the what do you recall going out on the town in those days in the 40s when Hollywood was a very small town, and it was just, either right before, well, you went away to the war, so you weren't here during the war. You told me you enlisted, and so you were away.
I was gone by the end of 1942, yeah.
Right. Well, talking a little bit just before you went away, do you remember the nightlife at that point? Was it really heated up? Was the aircraft industry going, and was it as lavish as they said about the girls like Lana and Ava and all them coming out to Ciro's all completely done up at night? Was it really that way, or was it a rare occasion and more for publicity?
Well, I think the ladies might have expected to get the publicity. They weren't forced to come out like that. They wanted the publicity. They enjoyed the publicity. A lot of us always felt a lot of the girls were sort of in competition with each other too, in terms of the publicity they would get. Was that make them a little more demandable for this role and that role, so forth. Maybe Mr. Mayer was favoring that one a little too much, so this one was going to try and look as good as she could, and so on and so forth.
Were there any great competitions that you remember between the women?
Well, I'm sure there were, but at that age, speaking of those people in the 40s, that wasn't my interest then,
How about the club owners, people like the guy that Lana married first, Steve Crane? What were they like? Were they kind of a part of the whole thing, or because I've read so many things, and I wonder, how does someone land into town from Indiana like Steve Crane? All of a sudden he's got a club. Were there these people that hung around on the periphery of you guys who were the stars, who kind of wanted to get up close? And
yeah, they wanted the people, the names as they were called, and Steve did too. I got to know him through his first little restaurant.
What was he like?
Very nice man. Very nice man. The little I had to do with him, very nice man. He was looking for a nice apartment to move into, and I helped him move into the building that I was in early 1942. And he, I think he did what he could to attract those kind of people also, because that attracted other people, the average man and woman who weren't in the movies, who wanted to go in there and look and see, is Ava Gardner going to be here? Is Lana Turner going to be here? Well, not Clark Gable. He didn't go out too much.
We were talking yesterday with Robert Stack about the great stars like Gable, and how they were pretty much in real life the way you saw them on the screen. Was that the way it was in that era, that the studio, in other words, you really didn't play act that much? What they saw when they tested you was kind of what they then wanted. So you saw a Lana Turner picture or a Clark Gable picture. You went to see them first, and the story kind of went along. But what was that about? Was it Was it a situation of having just this charisma that other people didn't have? Because Stack said, you know, people when Gable would walk down the lot, I mean, people just would stand there. Yet he didn't like personal publicity or anything. He didn't want to be part of that.
No, no. I got to know Clark a little bit through a skeet shooting club, if you know what that is, the little clay targets that you shoot at. And I was one of the few people in his business that ever went to this same place. And this was after the war. And we got to talking here and there, about the business a little bit, and then starting to see it change somewhat. And also the fact that it was very difficult to, you couldn't stop and say, Clark and I, you know, why don't we stop here and have a bite to eat on the way home, you know, in the afternoon or something. You couldn't do it with Clark. You'd start a riot in that restaurant practically, you know. And the manager of the restaurant wouldn't like it that much either, and he couldn't enjoy it.
Right.
He was a fantastic man, though. I found him just the most wonderful, plain kind of man's man, good guy. So, but I knew him, you know, as I say, through that little thing. Bump into him on the lot once in a while, but mostly at the skeet shooting club.
Well, you know, Van Johnson talks about how he was cast in his first movie with Lana and Gable, and how he was so frightened, you know, about doing the lines and everything. And he describes this thing of crawling through this foxhole and everything, and doing his line. And I don't, Luke, would you remember the director of that?
Wesley Ruggles.
Ruggles. After they yelled cut, he turns to Van and he goes, "Well, that was just awful." But I mean, that kind of honesty and banter.
Yeah.
It seems as though people had time. I mean, you made movies very quickly, but it seems as though people had a lot of time to communicate on the set. Was there a lot of communication? Did the directors really have a very hands-on kind of thing with you people?
Oh yes, oh yes. And if that director didn't, he was reduced to smaller B pictures and things like that. You know, the director, like Mr. Mayer, was very careful in Thalberg at MGM about putting Gable with certain directors who they knew Gable would respect, and they also wanted that director would respect Mr. Gable as a performer too. And with the ladies, the same thing, I'm sure. And they were directable, these guys, because a lot of them knew they had to learn. They weren't being themselves, and they weren't off trying. I want to play this kind of a role and that kind of a role. They knew, Mr. Gable knew he was being hired to be Mr. Gable, and as long as some director wasn't trying to make him something else, which the front office would have found out about soon enough anyway. Clark was very happy with that, and the director knew that that was his job.
And do you think that, like, with Ava Gardner and Rita Hayworth and Lana Turner, were they also being themselves too, do you think, to a large extent, or not?
I don't know. I didn't know those three ladies that well. That the only one I could say, you know, as still late teenagers, that Lana was mostly herself, and felt this is what she had to give, and that's all she has to give. I don't think she didn't work at it. I never heard her say, I want to be, I don't know if there was an Ingrid Bergman then, but or Greta Garbo. I mean, you never heard Lana speak about those kind of ambitions.
That's interesting.